Well, let's talk about the BBC with Roger Bolton. He's a former BBC executive. He's presenter of Bee Watch, which is a podcast. Roger, really interesting that the BBC has chosen to, well, the licence fee is going up by £5 next year. And the circumstances in which that was announced is a coincidence, of course, but the MasterChef scandal, Gregg Wallace accused of 3 sexual assaults today. That's the new line on that, and the BBC was warned about that 12 years ago. First of all, was warned certainly about his behaviour 12 years ago. First of all, let's deal with the licence fee going up. Is this necessary, do you think? Is this fair?
Well, it depends what you think about the BBC, whether you want it or not. The facts are that the value of the licence fee in real terms has gone down 42% since 2010. Deliberate attempt by the then Conservative government to squeeze the BBC. So it's lost that amount. The last government broke its promise to increase the licence fee by the rate of inflation in the last couple of years and institute a freeze instead. So if you support the BBC and public service broadcasting, you'd say this is long overdue. It's what basically is happening is that they're agreeing this rate of inflation increase until 2027. But by 2027, the BBC has to have a new charter or not. So it's a holding device, this increasing the licence fee by this amount, while the government then looks at whether the BBC should get a new charter. And what I hope will happen is there'll be a proper public debate about, do we need the BBC? Do we need public service broadcasting? And how should we pay for it? Because the other element is nobody can quite agree. Everybody thinks the licence fee is on the whole a bad thing, but nobody can agree on a replacement. So the government again, in this 2-year period, has committed itself to looking at alternatives.
Wave a magic wand, Roger. You can do whatever you like. What would your alternative to the licence fee be? What do you think is fair and would work? Or maybe there's a system around the world in a different country that works in some way. What do you think is fairest? Because there's whether you watch one programme a week or whether you listen and watch the BBC every single day or whether you never actually watch the BBC. There are some people that's the case. If you have a television that receives TV, live TV, well then you're going to have a licence fee. I mean, what is a fair system, do you think?
Well, they're all difficult. I mean, if you ask me personally, we can rule some out in the short term. Advertising, if your BBC took advertising, probably bankrupt you, bankrupt ITV and others. So that's not on in the short term. The advertising market won't do it. When you look at direct subscription, the problem with that is there are a lot of people who, maybe 1.5 million households, who can't access the internet, which is surprising. And also there are reception problems. So at least for the moment, subscription isn't on. Most people say the principle you've got to hold on to is universality. And if you do that, you're looking at some form of tax. And you look at that and say, what's fair and what's cheap or cheaper? And a lot of people come down to something like a broadband tax, and that is levied probably in the same way the rates are levied. In other words, you pay in accordance with how well off or not you are. But, basically, we need to make as a society this decision. Do we want public service broadcasting? I mean, we pay our taxes for a lot of things. A lot of us have different views about whether money should be spent on this, that, and t'other. But we accept it's a public good. Do we accept anymore that public service broadcasting is a public good? I do. If you do, then probably some form of tax, and maybe a broadband tax, is the way to go.
Very interesting thoughts there. Can we talk about the scandal that's engulfing the BBC this week, which is the Gregg Wallace one? And he's alleged to have done all sorts of things. Should say his lawyers say that he hasn't acted in a sexually improprietous manner. But he is accused of all sorts of things. He's accused of 3 sexual assaults. He's accused of making racist remarks to an Asian MasterChef contestant. He's accused of doing a silly dance whilst basically naked apart from a sock covering a part of his anatomy. There's an investigation now by Channel 5. There's an investigation by the production company that makes MasterChef. And we are told by one of the contestants in MasterChef that she raised some of the allegations, certainly in regard to how she was treated, as long ago as 12 years ago. This is, Roger, whether you're the most pro-BBC person, I'm not saying you are, but if even the most pro-BBC person would have to admit that this is all a depressingly familiar pattern in terms of a presenter allegedly getting away with things, not being pulled up by management, and it going on for a long time in plain sight.
Well, this is an industry-wide problem, and you've said, of course, that Gregg Wallace worked for Channel 5 as well. Well, I think that let's distinguish between them. There's a fundamental problem, I think. The presenters have become too powerful. At the same time as they've become too powerful, partly because, you know, channel controls, they say, we have to have that person, we have to have that star. At the same time, freelance young people have become, as it were, less secure in their jobs. It was always difficult to complain if you're a young person working with people, stars like this. And it was difficult to, you know, you've got a short-term contract, you're desperate for another job, you're quite young. These people tend to be quite old and authoritative. It's difficult. So the crucial role is to be played by executive producers or commissioning editors. Now, the problem with Gregg Wallace, I think, is there's people, and, well, I should say one other thing. There's a vast difference between Jimmy Savile, Hugh Edwards, as far as we know at the moment, and Gregg Wallace. Nobody is suggesting, as far as I understand, so far, serious sexual assault.
Well, three people say they were groped by him.
Well, let's define what we mean by sexual assault. As I understand it, it's alleged that he touched somebody's bottom.
I mean, that is sexual assault.
No, well, yes, it is, but because that term can cover so much.
Yeah, of course, but
we should be more explicit explaining that. So,
sure.
Everybody knows, look, Gregg Wallace is a 6-year-old geezer. That's one who comes from the working class, who was a market trader, who's been a very good presenter. He comes from that background. In some ways, he was selected because of that. And everybody knows what he's like. And he has a sense of humour, which is now, most people I think, is out of date. And in addition to that, although he's been warned several times, and he has a lot of people, including women producers, who like him and who would defend him in principle, but who've had to pull him up. There's something about Gregg that I don't know personally. He doesn't seem to be able to stop himself. You know, he's one of these jokey persons, whatever, and he doesn't have that self-censoring element, which says, hold on, not now, you're going too far. So he keeps behaving in this way. And ultimately, it's brought him down.
But surely if someone, I mean, we all know people who go a bit far, but we also know good managers who say, actually, do you know what, take you aside, I wouldn't do that in the workplace, I wouldn't say that. But if you're not told that it's wrong, and this seems to be the case in many different examples, I'm not comparing like for like, I'm not saying that this is another Jimmy Savile or this is another Hugh Edwards necessarily, but what I am saying is there appears to be a culture, not just at the BBC, but in various parts of broadcasting, where managers don't tell powerful presenters that's not acceptable, whereas those other researchers that you're talking about there at the start of their career, if they did something like that, they'd be out.
I agree absolutely with that. I think it's a failure. It's a matter of power, ultimately. And we're a situation where those people with the power essentially are the commissioners. But we have a situation at the moment where people are so desperate for stars and elsewhere, the independent producers who go, are scared often to say anything against the stars because the controller wants them or the commissioner wants them. So I think you start at the top. I don't like the situation where young people are increasingly blamed for this and not speaking out when it's very difficult to do so.
Yeah.
On the other hand, with somebody like Gregg Wallace, he has been spoken to. Whether this action should have been taken earlier, I think it probably should. But I think you're dealing with a man of real talent, but of real problems. But I don't think at the moment it's at the scale that it deserves being associated with some of the other cases in the past, or necessarily should mean his career is over. But he has to stop doing this and behaving this way. It's not acceptable.
And Roger, it's interesting, I mean, we have, you're talking about junior staff, and I totally appreciate your point, and I think you've made a really good one. But also we have many more senior people, Emma Kennedy, for example, Celebrity MasterChef winner, who had made allegations as early as, or as far away as 12 years ago. There's another Celebrity MasterChef contestant, we don't know who it was, who said he pressed himself on me from behind so I moved away, then he called me a stupid cow. I mean, there are senior people. We also have Kirsty Wark now on the record making allegations as well. So there does seem to be a real failure of management here as well. I wonder, given that the production company has launched an investigation, do you think that is actually something they want to get to the bottom of this? Or is this a matter of trying to see a face? Because presumably, I mean, Lorraine Hegasy, former director of television, I think, at the BBC said it's inconceivable that senior managers did not know about this. Yeah,
she was controller of BBC One, a very good controller too. It's very difficult, isn't it? I think what we have to say is that there has been, for too long, it's been tolerated. I think there has been a culture change. But I think you have to, there's two levels of responsibility, aren't there, here? There's a responsibility on those who are in charge to make absolutely sure that people with less power can speak up and be heard and not be, oh, please don't raise this, the commission's too important, we can't lose this commission, etc., etc. This star's too important, look how popular it is, we can't afford to lose the audience. That's got to start at the top. But I think you have to ask some of these other people, did they speak out earlier? If they didn't, why they didn't? Not to blame them. But we need a proper investigation into it. But I think there is a cultural change. But as long as you have a situation where power resides with a handful of people, and a lot of people do not have that power, then you have a dangerous situation. It's absolutely the responsibility of senior commissioning editors and others, the owners of independent companies, and the channel controllers to stamp on this. Whether Gregg Wallace has a future, I don't know. I mean,
I think it'll be pretty tough to come back from this.
Yeah, it's very difficult to come back. But again, we're not absolutely sure exactly what happened, but that he has this habit of making offensive jokes and offensive behaviour, particularly to women over a long period, is undoubtedly true. Sad, but true.
Okay.